Right. So good morning, everybody. And we would like to begin. Yes, we have 5 minutes of schedule, but we'd like to start now. Principal, ma'am, are you with us? I can't see you. Right. So good morning, everybody. And we would like to begin. Yes, we have 5 minutes of schedule, but we'd like to start now. There was a slight echo. That was because YouTube was on. Principal Mari, ma'am. Yeah, she's connecting. Vice Principal Susan, are you there? Okay, I think they're having slight problem connecting. We'll just give them a minute or two. Okay. All right, Susie, 1 minute.
Yes, thank you.
You're there? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Principal Mari, ma'am. I think she's having a little trouble connecting to the audio. I hope she's not muted also. My co-host, Calvin Arshi, could you do the needful for Principal, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Principal Dr. Mari Fernandez, my vice principals, Dr. Susan Lobo, Dr. Sharon Durham, the teaching faculty and students from various other colleges, my colleagues and students from St. Andrews College and guests, very good morning and welcome to On the Frontiers of Economics 2023, the annual symposium of the Department of Economics and Business Economics. For members of our audience who are not familiar with our college, allow me to give you a brief introduction to St. Andrews. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Okay. So our college is the result of the thoughtfulness of a few visionaries under the leadership of Cardinal Pimenta. We were very privileged to have Nobel laureate Mother Teresa unveil the plaque which heralded the beginning of St. Andrews College of Arts, Science and Commerce on 1st January 1981. The degree college was inaugurated in 1983, and this year we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of our college. The Department of Economics and Business Economics has been hosting conferences and symposia since 2010-2011. In its current version, On the Frontiers of Economics, this is the third online symposium. Our symposium is a forum for exploring cutting-edge ideas, happenings, and research in the field of economics. The symposium today brings together leading practitioners, policymakers, and scholars to share their insights and discuss the latest trends and developments in the field. So whether you are an economist, a policymaker, a student simply interested in learning more about the latest trends in economics, there is something for everyone. In recent times, headlines in the field include the digitization of the economy, artificial intelligence, India's leadership of G20, and the introduction of RBI's central bank digital currency. It is around these issues and their implications that we have 4 sessions with excellent speakers. We would say more about each of them at the start of their session. Okay. Right. 1 minute. Principal Mari, ma'am, are you with us now? I don't think so.
No, ma'am. Ma'am is facing network issue, I guess.
Okay. All right. So we have with us Dr. Susan Lobo, our Vice Principal. Dr. Lobo, would you address the audience, please? But let me introduce you. Dr. Susan Lobo is a member of the Department of English, and she's also in charge of the Students' Council, besides handling several other portfolios in the college, the magazine, etc. She's extremely passionate about her subject, but is also very keen to learn about other subjects. It is my privilege to invite Dr. Susan Lobo to say a few words and declare the proceedings of this symposium open. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Modi. And on behalf of the management of our college and our principal, Dr. Mari Fernandez, I would like to extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you. First of all, let me congratulate the Department of Economics for organizing this particular symposium. To our invited speakers, our keynote speaker, Dr. Archana Hingorani, the other invited speakers, Mr. Vikram Sinha, Mr. Ian Almeida, Mr. Purandar Gopal Krishnan, and last but not the least, Mr. Nihal Fernandez, who is our is an ex-Andrian. And I still remember how he used to keep, he was very frequent visitor to the staff room, because he will almost every day would come and stand outside the staff room waiting to speak to the professors from the Department of Economics, because that was the kind of passion that he had for the subject. So I'm not surprised that he is here with us today. So warm welcome once again to everyone. The topics look really interesting, but I'll have to say that I know little or next to nothing about them. I'm, as Dr. Modi said, from the Department of English, so I have no clue about what is happening on the frontiers of economics. But I think I have an excuse because I'm not from that department. But I think those who are from the discipline should not have an excuse for not knowing what is happening on the frontiers of the discipline of economics. And topics like, though I might not know much about the details of topics like, digitization and blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, labor economics, etc. I do know that these are the buzzwords of the times in which we are living today. And I think for that reason, I hope that by the end of, I don't hope, I know that by the end of this symposium, everyone, all the participants will go home thoroughly enlightened about what these terms mean and what is going on the frontiers of economics. So I would like to wish you all the very best. And on that note, I declare the symposium open.
Thank you so much, Susan. And yes, hope you would be able to join us after your lectures as well. And yes, we would live up to our motto, enlighten the darkness. And of course, let's make it brighter. Yeah, thank you, Susie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again. We are going to begin with our keynote address. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Oops. Just a minute. This juggling between Zoom and PowerPoints is really painful sometimes. Okay, here we go. So it's my privilege and of course a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Archana Hingorani. Dr. Hingorani has more than 25 years of experience in the asset management business. She has rich experience in fundraising, investing, nurturing investments through 4 different economic cycles, carving exit paths, and spearheading environmental, social, and corporate governance programs. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Sienna Capital, which is an asset management business focused on technology and impact investments. She is also a visiting distinguished professor at the Cates Graduate School of Business, University of Pittsburgh, for private equity and alternative assets. Thus, she has that rare combination of being an academician and a practitioner. In her formative years, she helped create a new company and raise funds focused on oil exploration, which was a first for India. This led the Foundation for Understanding Private Markets. Dr. Hingorani serves on the University of Pittsburgh's Chancellor's Global Advisory Council. She is on the advisory board of Talentnomics, a Washington-based group that is focused on encouraging the upward movement of women in the workforce. She is also a part of the Global Impact Initiative, an Australian firm focused on impact investments. Given the current interest and definite concern with the environment, it's great that she's a part of the investment commissions of the United Nations Environment Program. She has also served on more than 20 corporate governance boards, compensation and audit committees. She currently serves on the boards of Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited, Grindwell Norton, Sitbee Venture Capital Limited, DEN Networks Limited, and 5 Paisa Limited. Dr. Hingorani has been recognized for her leadership by Business World, Fortune India, and Asian Investor. She has been featured in Business Today's list of Most Powerful Women in Business 2013 and Fortune India's list of Most Powerful Women in 2014 and 2017. On behalf of the Department of Economics and Business Economics of St. Andrews College, I extend a very warm welcome to you, Archana. We're extremely privileged to have you with us today. So over to Dr. Hingorani for the keynote address, India, the digitized elephant can definitely dance. My co-hosts, have you made Archana ma'am a co-host? Yeah? No, you haven't? Okay. One sec, Archana. All right, you're the co-host now, and you can take over. Yeah, I've unmuted you also. Yeah. Yes, Archie, you're all set to go. Good to go. We can't hear you.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, we're good to go.
Yeah. Okay, so am I starting? Can you not hear me?
We just heard that last bit. Can you not hear me?
Okay, so I said, am I starting now?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So you've given me sharing rights, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Yeah.
You can see the screen.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. So good morning, everybody. I know it's really early and Saturday to have a in-depth talk on economics, but let's see if we can make it interesting. Actually, Dr. Modi and I were figuring out what should be the topic. And we realized that in today's world, there are three things that whichever part of the globe you're in, an economic student or even a science student, you need to know three things going forward, at least in the working world, as well as in a social and cultural world, which is that technology and science has to be part of our everyday lives as well as corporate lives. We have to be more thoughtful about how we think about environment and social parameters, as well as the fact that we as India now the center stage, there is no doubt about it. We used to be many, many centuries ago. We seem to be getting our mojo right back. So let's see what that means, right? So this is what we look like. If you look at the cartoon on the left side, we are an amalgamation of new technologies, all ideas interspersed all across the country. There's no piece of this country today that is not affected by technology. Telecom being the reason for it. Many of you were not born probably in the early 90s when India was in a crisis situation from a economics perspective. We had money only to run the country for less than 2 months. And we were given loans by IMF only on the condition that we would be smarter this time and open ourselves up to become a free-flowing economy, as well as take on more, let's say, more commercial aspirations for the country. And as you can see, that was the biggest gift we probably could have given ourselves as a country, is to go bankrupt and come back from it. And because of that, we started what today is known as the telecom revolution for India. Many of us didn't have landlines. Forget landlines, today we don't even use them, right? And we only use cell phones. That's all because of 1991. So what has that done to us today? So you look at it, as some people are calling it an Amrit Kal or a golden period. Why? Because today we are the 5th largest economy in terms of GDP at $3 trillion. We will soon become the 3rd largest in about probably end of this decade. We have been able to provide a lot of management and economic talent to the world. We will soon be seen, I should correct it. We are being seen as a global economy. There is no global economic conversation that does not involve India. Primarily because of course, we've come into our own. We are at the end of the day, the largest, probably very soon, the largest population in the world. We are already at 1.4 billion. There is no argument that anybody who wants to sell a new product or old product should definitely focus on us as a country, because we are the largest consuming population. We are also, as I said, we're getting a seat at the table at everything that's happening across the world, be it we are ourselves hosting G20 with such pride. You go across India, every city is a center for G20 conversations. Almost all parts of the world have been traveling to remote areas of India to understand what we do and how we do and how well we do it now, as well as the fact that any let's say quasi-military, quasi-technology conversation involves us. Quad, for example, is a very good example of calling it coming together for military reasons, but really coming together to make sure that we all are ahead of technology. So Quad is basically India, US, Japan, Australia coming together to make sure that from a technology perspective, we all work together and become avant-garde. It may be to take away other influences, but that's not relevant. The fact is that we are part of Quad, right? And we're also, because of that, we are doing two things as a country. We are making technology consciously and subconsciously the core of how we progress on economic terms, social terms, and even cultural terms. I mean, all of you are very, very familiar with social media. I don't think any of you can think of life without Insta, Facebook, etc. Right? As well as the fact that we are very cognizant that as a world global player, we have to definitely come to the table and think about, in large terms, climate change, but in very small terms, every aspect of environment and social influence. Because we are at the center stage. Now, some of us may say it's not fair. 20, 30, 40 years ago, the developed world used all the coal in the world. It did not have the things that they have today. They behaved exactly like us maybe 50, 100 years ago. Now is our chance. We should be allowed to behave like that. Well, the fact is, it's like, you know, being the sixth or seventh sibling. You don't get what the first one got, right? So here we are, center stage. Look at us. Our growth for the last 20 years from an economic GDP perspective has been averaging 6%. We are now at that phase where we're in the takeoff stage. I'm just giving two examples. Economically, it has been proven that once you reach this particular inflection point, the next 15, 20 years are yours, right? So you see Japan, for example, on the right-hand side, same thing happened to them. Germany on the left-hand side. There are many such examples. So the point being made to the world by us and they to us is the fact that we are now at that stage where we are going to grow very well for the next 15, 20 years. And I think that's the reason we all, A, of course, should recognize it, but B, take advantage of the fact that we can become a thriving and prospering economy. So just on the left-hand side, some history. It took us 60 years, okay, to become a 1 trillion economy. Then took us another 12 years to get to 2. And then took us only 5 years to get to 3, right? And the right-hand side is showing you that come FY48, let's say 25 years from now, we'll be a $25 trillion economy. That's why all the hoopla about who we are, why India, why is the focus, why are there so many country heads wanting to visit, etc. But that's external factors. That's nothing to, it's because we have come to this stage. But the fact is that we put in a lot of effort in the last, I would say since 91 to reach where we are today. And today is the story is just being waiting to be told, right? And this is another chart, which is basically saying that our per capita income is going to cross $13,000 by 2045, by which time, you know, we will not be, we have moved from less developed country in the 70s to developing emerging country from the 80s, let's say till today, and we should become, you know, in economic jargon, a developed country by then. Right-hand side just showing you the G20 countries, what they do, how they do, and we are a very small speck relative to the other bigger ones, but we have huge amount of influence today in how global decisions are going to be made. Just so that all of you out there, young minds, please aspire to be more than this. Look at this slide. It's basically showing many Indian men and women. Please notice many women have started heading at firms, global firms outside the country, inside the country. I can tell you by experience, Lena used to be head of HR, HUL India till about 15 years ago. This is India born, India prospered example. There are many here who are, you know, went to the US, etc. And one might say, you know, they absorbed that culture, etc. But there are a few names on this chart which are Indian born, Indian trained, Indian management, then moving globally, telling you that we do have the chops to do that. So I'm putting a shout out to all of you out there that you must all aspire to become one of these. So what's important? As I said earlier, there are two things that are very, very important for us. It's one thing to say that next 15 years are ours. What are we going to do in those 15 years is what we should be focusing on, right? So one is, as I said, there are no two ways about it. You cannot live without technology. Just like as individuals, we realize that, you know, I know, you know, many of you don't know what a rotary phone is because you've always seen a mobile phone, right? That's been a huge transformation in this country, and not only in this country, everywhere else. You know, mobile phones were not a big deal, let's say 20 years ago. The focus has to be, even from a company perspective, you know, the HULs of this world, or even the smaller guys, until and unless they don't transform by absorbing technology, they're not going to stay. So that's the reason I think kudos to many governments, the prior one for the telecom revolution, this one for taking it, you know, in stride and saying, let's convert everything to technology is what we actually need to do. Many countries are far behind. You know, there are many countries from an economic perspective who may be larger than us, who have not even touched any part of this, right? So this is the point that we are making. We have the most number of unicorns in the country today. We are filing the most amount of patents. See, it's very nice and fashionable to say that you're a startup or you're a tech something. Everybody uses the word tech behind the sector that they are in. But what is important to notice is that you need to be not only innovative, but you need to be so distinguished from others that you can amass all the important innovations and patents. And that's exactly what we're doing as a country, are being encouraged by the government to do it, be it via the startup funding or the ability to have easier patent rights, etc. There are a lot of things that are going on. So you can see we are taking a large chunk of that attention from both global financial resources as well as Indian resources. So why am I harping on this? This has been my what should I call it? My sort of my song for almost a decade with everybody, that it's coming, and it has come today. Look at this. 2006, there was only Microsoft that was one of the big boys in terms of market cap across the world. You had more traditional, Exxon being an oil company, Citibank being a financial services company, GE being a manufacturing company, being top 5. Look at it today. It's completely changed. Everybody is a technology company. Remember, technology doesn't mean that you're not doing everyday things. Some of them are still are supporting future. So, for example, let's look at Microsoft, right? It's not only a software services company. It also requires for its products a lot of chip manufacturing, right? So there's a lot of manufacturing sitting underneath all of this, but everything looks like it's the big software companies. They aren't just software companies; they're much more than that. And I would encourage all of you to read this article by Mark Anderson, which talks. This is 2011, right around the time when technology was starting to rear its head. He had said that software is eating the world, and truly it is. Today it's eating every industry. So if you don't know what you're doing and you think that, let's say you're very comfortable being a auto component supplier to Tatas and saying they have to take my V belt or my tire, where will they go? And I'm not going to do any technology. You're going to be gone, because each V belt and each tire is now being I hope you guys know everything in this world is now going to have a chip in it, right? So until and unless you don't have that smart chip in the things that you manufacture, you're not going to be in the market, right? Here's just an example on the right-hand side. It shows how quickly technology penetrates. Although this is about the US, it's also any country that you map will look like this, right? Telephones took, landline telephones took very long till about, the 50s or 60s to penetrate. But once it became cellular, almost everybody had it. The point being made is that today when technology is introduced, it's absorbed very, very quickly, be it by us as citizens of this globe or corporates. They better do it, otherwise they will go away. So just like the example I gave you about V-belts, there probably Bajaj Auto had never thought that, their 2-3-wheelers will not sustain, will be so competitive that they don't need to worry about it. They're all now running around trying to convert it to electric, because that's the new technology that's come in, right? There are many such examples on this slide, basically saying that traditional ways of doing business have transformed completely. There is no thought. I mean, none of us can think about, not spending the weekend thinking about what's on Hotstar or what's on Netflix, which was all obviously never there even 10 years ago, right? This is just trying to tell you that this is not true just about India. It is about the world. Technology investments have been soaring significantly. The next in line are financial services investments and healthcare. But mind you, both of them are also based on technology. It may be called a financial services investment, but it is being prompted by the fact that you need to convert all your systems through innovation and adapting newer forms of technology. And technology is a very big word, so I'm going to get to it as to what that means. So here is a slide. I think all of you by now would have heard the word artificial intelligence. Everybody and every company that you talk to, a startup says, I am an AI ML company. What does that mean? You need to understand it's at a very basic level. It's really simple. It's basically saying computers, machines, robots can emulate human brain. That's what it means at a very, very base level. But that needs significant computation capabilities. And what I'm showing you on the left side, some of the words you are unpronounceable because they are technologies that are still coming into being. For example, multi-omic technologies, it's a very big word. But if you see some of the more understandable ones, such as robotics, cryptocurrencies, I'm sure all of you have heard of them, battery technologies, intelligent devices such as our smart watches, and maybe in the near future, smart glasses like Kashmira is wearing, maybe they will be smarter than what it is today, etc. Right? So if you look at it, AI still existed even, let's say, 10 years ago, but it's just come in. Actually, I'm wrong. AI has been existing since 1962. It was born in the Carnegie Mellon University many, many moons ago. But in its commercial format, it's taken that many years to bring it to the table, right? So what you're seeing, these examples, right? The Google or Chrome searches that we do, they're based on AI because they pop up the same kind of questions that you asked earlier on their own. How do they do that? It's basically the AI computing engine working behind it. There are many such things, your Siri and Alexa, they're based on speech. The speech is an important part of what we do as humans, and that's being emulated. So the left-hand side is basically showing you that all of them actually are hugely interconnected. All of these smart, new avant-garde technologies, the crux of it is AI, and they spawn out of it, they interact with it, they make AI better, AI makes them better. So it's all a very hugely interconnected let's say problem as well as an opportunity that most people are trying to look at. Let me just give you 2-3 examples. So if you look on the left-hand side, prior to AI, right, coming into technology pieces as high as something like robotics, right? Robotics, in any case, you're thinking is super high-end, a lot of science involved in making the robots. Without AI, correct, they were 72% correct in what they did. Today, they're 97% correct. Without AI, they could not, your own mind. After a few, just because it's seeing the same thing, suddenly it sees a pattern and it comes to a different path. How does it do that? That's the human brain, right? So this is exactly what today you can do because of AI. You can do never seen tasks through AI 76% of the time and do it correctly, right? Just one example. Second example, crypto. All of you've heard of Bitcoin. Many people think that, you can trade on them and make money overnight and become rich, etc. But crypto has it's a much deeper technology. So for example, today, solar energy, wind energy, etc., is being focused on a whole lot more because of climate change, right? The problem with all of these type of new energies is that they're not grid friendly because, solar energy can only be created when the sun is up. Energy can be created when the wind is there, right? And then you have to store them. Because they're intermittent, Bitcoin technology works perfectly for them, right? So if you combine cryptocurrency or Bitcoin technology with providing wind and solar energy to the population, then it's a win-win. And imagine these technologies coming together, right? One last one, your phone batteries, right? Prior to advanced battery technologies coming, which are again based on AI, your battery capacities used to die very quickly. Today, they don't, because they're getting smarter and better every day, right? These are just out of the box, very, very exciting concepts. And I think you're going to see more of this. A lot of it actually, you don't know that you're already using it. So for example, you're using intelligent devices, right? Just like your phone, or even many of you have measurement devices, how much you walked, etc. All of these are based on a culmination of both the fact that you can measure and the fact that you have advanced battery technologies. Why is this important? Why am I harping on it so much? So there is enough data for all of you guys as students of economics and business economics to know that technology changes lead to GDP growth. So on the left-hand side, this is a simulation done on data available, which shows that real GDP has on average grown about 3% from the 1900s, let's say, to 2021. the stacking up of new technology, okay, will add another 8.5% GDP to the world. And I'm sure that we will take a big chunk of it because of the stage at which we are and the number of people that live in this country, etc. Right? That's the reason I talked about it. But this is why it's relevant from a economics and a GDP perspective, that absorbing these technologies leads to a quantum jump in the way your GDP behaves. Right? What are we doing as a country about it? Two things. We already are, we were the back office and the BPO to the world maybe 15, 20 years ago. We are no longer that. We're giving high-end services, both in terms of technology as well as services based on technology. Right-hand side, a very, very important thing that happened for India was the technology dispersion done by the government, both in terms of, so Aadhaar, UPI, as well as your eKYC are considered by most part of the world as being absolutely amazing jumps in technology revolutions, given that we are a 1.4 billion population. And many of these things, for example, the Paytm piece, which works on UPI, is now not Paytm, UPI is being sourced by many countries from India for their own population. So we are digitized, we are ready as from a base, let's say a digitization infrastructure is already in place, and it is all up to, companies, citizens to take advantage of the fact that you're already there and build on it, right? So therefore, you see, I just want to point out, I said this a little earlier in the beginning, there is no difference between the energy that we bringing to the table today as a country, as companies, etc., from the 90s. There's one difference. In the 90s, we were absorbing technologies that were there all over the world to become, more advanced, such as we absorbed cellular technology, we absorbed piped gas, we did optic fibers. All these were already existing somewhere else. We were taking them in and making them first-time sectors for India. Today, it's materially different in one sense. We are doing the same thing. We all are absorbing new technologies, new sunrise sectors. The huge difference is all of these sectors are being created right here in India on our own, using our own brain power and our own systems. That's the huge difference. And therefore, the right-hand side, that we are the third largest hub of startup activities, as well as having many, many more unicorns than many other countries in this world. The second part, which is my favorite, which is, even 10 years ago, people would have, economic people, or, let's say people who are focused on growth would have told you there is growth and sustainability are the opposite of each other. You want to grow, you can grow. You want to sustain, you can sustain. Both cannot meet, because sustainability means low economic outcomes and growth means greater economic outcomes. And they are two separate things. That's not true. Okay. So because it's not true, it's been already proven, and I will show you how. Everybody, many governments, many corporations, many investors, all of them have started to focus on what it means to live a better life, both as citizens as well as companies, which allows us to be very good in terms of how we don't destroy the environment. So the E for the environment, S for being the social piece. In any country in this world today, the lesser inequalities you have, the better ability for you to not have, let's say, distress or disparities which lead to issues that are highly controllable. So what do you mean by S? The S factor could be that, can easily be that their gender parity is absorbed by all corporations, right? That's an example of S. S doesn't necessarily mean just give your money away to philanthropy. That is also good. But in the S, you can do things that are relevant, but still economically sustainable. And the G part, which is basically saying that the more transparent you are about your process, your product, your services, and the easier it is to understand, the lesser conflicts of interest that you bring to the table, all of that leads to improved valuations and therefore better economic outcomes. So this is true since quite a few years now, 15, 20 years globally. Nike, Starbucks, Tesla, Bloomberg, all of them have very, very strong ESG policies. It's also true about India. We have Infosys, we have HUL, we have many companies that have started to adopt ESG. The government itself has been pretty vocal about making sure that every company adopts that. CSR, perhaps maybe when it came out 5-7 years ago, CSR, basically the rule is 2% of all profits have to be put into CSR by companies. That's all fine. But you want more than CSR. You want ESG in your company. It allows you to thrive. It allows you to have better hygiene in terms of the right things to do and not to do the wrong things. And therefore, it leads to improved perceptions as well as a better economic outcome. So for example, there is a huge financial inclusion gap, right? Even in countries like, even when we have become so, while I keep on saying we have become big, we are doing this, ABC, but there are still huge disparities in terms of financial inclusion. The government already started, many schemes to make sure that everybody has a bank account, make sure that everybody has access, to different financial inclusion policies, but it's a huge gap. So I would say that this is easily providing financial inclusion to many of the underprivileged is the wrong word, economically the lower stratas of economic groups. If you bring them in, that's a huge part of the SPs that I was talking about. Right? Here's what I was trying to tell you. A lot of surveys done. If you look at it, many of them, when they were done in, let's say 2009, which is almost 15 years ago, right? There was all this whole talk about how, ESG is not economically viable. If you want what the other common word uses, impact. If you want impact, you should know that your returns can't be no more than 7-8%. Sometimes you'll get zero return, etc. All that perception has changed. There are 3 or 4 big pieces that have changed. As students of economics, I'm sure you understand that anything that has higher risk is more costly. Okay, so ESG, if you can think about another framework, is that ESG is like a risk diversification tool. The more of ESG you adopt as a company or an organization, the lesser risk you have. What do I mean by that? For example, let's say you're a new company starting in a sector that has a lot of effluent, which is wastage, which is chemicals, etc. And you decide that since the government has not made it compulsory for me to look after my wastage, I'm not going to do it, okay, because it's too expensive. You become successful over 4 or 5 years. And then you realize now I'm getting bigger contracts and nobody's giving me a contract because I have to take care of that effluent. And you try and do it 5 or 10 years later, you will be spending 10x the money to get it right. Whereas you could have spent literally 1/100th of that money on day one when you started if you had adopted the right practices. So these are just good examples to think about why, to me, ESG is over, let's say, the 10 years, none of you, I'm sure, if I was to challenge you and say that, look, I have a firm that's doing well, but we don't know what the P&L is. They don't have any accounting. They don't do that. Everything is based on money in, money out. So I don't know what the best accounting practice is. I don't know what their inventory is. You wouldn't. You would say, where is the auditor certificate? But I want to see that before I believe your numbers, right? ESG is going to become exactly that in 10 years, or maybe even 5 years. There is enough evidence to show that companies that are more ESG positive trade at better stock prices than ones that are not. In our studies. So I'm just focusing on this a little bit more to make sure that when you guys come out into the working world, you're very, very vocal about the fact that you need ESG in every aspect of life, yes, but in any company that you work for. So here's my take on what all this means. I'm saying you take technology, you take ESG, you put both the lenses together, and you have a recipe for not only great success, but satisfying success. because you're absorbing latest technologies, you're becoming more avant-garde, you're intellectually stimulated because you're working in the latest type of things. Things are changing every day. It's great to be born and be a young worker in this economy. I wish we had been born today, because it's really amazing what all you can do. And you can do different jobs every day and still be in the same firm. I mean, I think that's really amazing. All of this can be done if you put them together. It's a great recipe for success. So I always advocate, even in the investing world, that you want to do technology, yes, but you make sure every company that you invest in also is doing things that improve their ESG quotient. Yeah. So what have we done as a country for these two pieces? One, of course, is the fact that we are transitioning to a sustainable energy country. I mean, we know that the government of India, the Prime Minister, have all put up their hand and said by X year, we will be at least having X amount of solar energy, less amount of coal, etc. Now, you know, these things have implications, right? I mean, imagine a country like ours where many plants are fired by coal, right? We've been doing this. Yes, it's not good for the environment, but look at the amount of employment it generates. As students of economics, you will know that it's very critical, the labor that has been used for so many years in the coal mines, in getting the coal to convert to energy, etc. Now, the world is saying stop all this because it's not good for the environment. Yes, we recognize that, but what do we have to do as a country? Of course, convert from more coal to less coal and greater solar, etc., which we are doing very, very consciously and very, very rapidly. We have been doing it for the last 10 years, right? But we have another responsibility on us as a country, that all the people who are now not going to be working in coal mines, we need to make sure that they get equivalent jobs or be retrained to be able to do other jobs which are more friendly from an ESG perspective. So, you know, I think from that perspective, I would say that the current government should be given full points, that not only are we trying to convert, but we are trying to make sure that we are retooling many sections of working society to be able to work in the new economy of today, right? Right-hand side, this is so key. You know, manufacturing, to many of us who are from economics and finance, would be like so boring, you know, so many things to do, so many pieces. You build it, you know, you have to do 50,000 widgets at a time to build one car. How is that interesting, right? This is the nub of what we need to do as a country. So, you know, we've fully taken advantage of the low-hanging fruit from a global perspective. That we have many engineers, many software engineers. We have fully taped up the idea of how to provide services not only to ourselves, which we don't do that great a job as yet, but we do a fabulous job of providing services across the world. We are competitive, we are number one, etc. That's a low-hanging fruit, because that involved making sure that, you know, your educated urban populations have are transformed from just being, you know, what they were doing earlier to becoming these very competitive, very in demand software engineers, you know, innovation types, the people who are coming up with new computing capabilities, etc. To my mind, it's the low-hanging fruit, because that was accessible, available, easy to convert. This piece is the one that really needs focus, that we as a country do need to make sure that we are high on the manufacturing competitiveness index, which we are not. Not because of anything else, but the fact that at least till about 15-20 years ago, our infrastructure was weak, which meant that we didn't have great roads, not great railways. You know, airlines were hardly there. 20 years ago, we had maybe 2 or 3. All of that led to higher logistics cost. It led to, we do have, you know, long-standing labor type of, non-economic labor type of issues. There are so many things that happen in manufacturing. And as a country, we're now starting to become really smart about it and focusing on sectors which are actually, you know, ESG friendly. So we're saying that we want to do semiconductors, we want to do electric vehicles, we want to do solar panels, we want to do drones. We want to get away from, obviously, the type of sectors that are more less friendly to the environment, but we can do that by staying where we are on what we were already doing, not encouraging the more, let's say, more pollutive sectors, but bringing up new sectors, which then allows over time for people to move from, the ones that are not that attractive from a environment perspective to the ones that are more. And this is where the challenge is, and this is probably where we need to really focus. I think we have taped up services. We have taped up the fact that we know how to do technology. We have taped up the fact that we have enough capability as well as startup culture in this country to come up with innovations. This is a piece that really needs focus, and you're starting to see that develop piece by piece, right? So that's the, more specific technology and let's say sustainability piece that we as a country are working on. What are we doing in terms of making sure that both those things, the Venn diagram that I showed of, ESG meeting technology is great, but it cannot happen without the economic aspect, without the finance aspect, right? So what are we doing as a country for that? Two things. One, we're making sure that we have enough resources from a capital perspective, be it debt, be it equity, provision in this country for organizations big and small to grow rapidly. So we're very low, if you look at it, on the credit as a percentage of GDP. From a commercial perspective, we're only at 54%, whereas much of the world has crossed 100% and have grown because of that. And it's, a conservative mind would say that, how can you sustain credit, which is more than, your own GDP? Is that a good thing to do? Isn't that too risky? The answer is from a commercial organization, corporate perspective, probably not probably, it isn't. Because if you see many of the successful companies that start new, let's say new plants, physical plants, capex, etc., normally get a 2:1 debt equity ratio funding, meaning 2 parts debt, 1 part equity, right? That's considered conservative in the economic world, right? So we are not even there. We're at 0.5:1, right? So we do need to move up this curve, and I think there are enough incentives. Availability of capital is there. Capital is always lacking in any part of the world. Everybody is always looking for capital. So it's great to see that. If you notice in the last 10 years, you will see that every big financial institution that lends money or provides equity has made a home or a base in India. So, I mean, you take the big boys of private investing, be it a KKR, be it a Canada Pension Fund, be it a Blackstone, be it a BlackRock, they all are here providing capital, right? Telling you that this, taking advantage of all these debt equity capacities is probably the way to focus on new businesses, right? And the right hand side, which has also to do with investing, and I will explain why, is also very critical. This is something that we did not have 20 years ago. Very poor roads. It takes 5 hours to do something that can happen in an hour. Not that many flights. Rail, even the ports were choked. It would take 15-20 days to get your commercial product out of the port because it was so badly choked. There was not enough capacities. That's been changing over the last 20 years. And 20 years ago, there was no private company that knew how to build a road, knew how to run a port, knew how to run electricity. Everything was done by the government, right? Or obviously telecom services only started because it was opened up. So were other infrastructure. And today, while we are, we had to do a lot of catching up. Imagine not having good infrastructure for 40-50 years and then trying to build it out. It takes time. All of you are living in the city of Mumbai. We're in such state of despair. Our air quality index is so poor, primarily because there is so much construction going on of not only bridges, subways, metros, etc. I'm hoping that it goes away in the next 5-10 years. And we definitely will see our economic prospects changing. Hopefully the air quality index also gets better. So all of these in my head are like super critical to making sure that we are able to grow economically. And I just wanted to leave this with you in the end, this is a little different interpretation of can the elephant dance. Originally, the interpretation was that if you are very big and huge like us, we're a huge country with so many people, it's not easy to change course, because imagine trying to move an elephant suddenly or making him, do it very nicely. It was difficult. That's what it meant. Here, I'm saying that, look at this, we are a very diverse country. We're all looking at it from different aspects. I know some of them look like Chinese. They can also be Northeastern. So let's not worry about that. The point I'm trying to make is that all of us have different lenses, and that's what gives us the diversity and the capacity to probably grow to be one of the leaders from an economic as well as, I would like to think, social perspectives. So I think that's what I wanted to convey today. I hope some of it was absorbable, and I'm happy to take questions.
Right, so thank you, Dr. Hingorani, for that sweeping view of the prospects of the Indian economy, and the fact that we have a tremendous capacity to lead the world today. One example, of course, is leading G20. That's been there on everybody's mind. But in more ways than one, we are capable of providing great leadership to the world in various fields, because being a diverse economy and with so many sectors, and we are doing very well in some of them, we have that tremendous capacity. So wonderful. You've covered infrastructure, you've covered inclusivity, you've covered sustainability. You have looked at the fact that we have moved from being the major back office of the world to a country which is dancing to the tune of digitization, and of course, providing great leadership for the same. So it gives us hope that we can beat, hopefully, the problem of inequality in the future, poverty in the future as well, and help other countries to do the same. Yeah. So for those who would like to ask a question, please put it in the chat. And if there aren't too many, we would be able to even unmute you. Archana, if you can close your PowerPoint.
Yes, I'm just doing that.
Yeah. Right. So would anybody like to ask any questions? I guess it's a lot of information to absorb at this point. But
too early in the morning, Cash, and on a Saturday. So yeah.
But I guess in college, we're used to it, we work 6 days a week. Remember, we had that in college too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Mari ma'am, any thing you'd like to say? Okay. Okay, so maybe I would put a question to you,
Sure.
Archana. Today we are so concerned with the environment and sustainable development. And, you mentioned the fact that most of the developing countries saying, hey, you did that, 60 years ago. I mean, why are you telling us to cut down on our prospects of growth and development? But I think with technology that's come in, I think it would be easier for India, I think, to lead from the front in bringing in more sustainable development, right? And while doing that, we could bring in technologies, we could bring in policies which would involve people getting more jobs. We could become more inclusive and maybe provide, a leadership role in that sense. Also, being a country which is on the forefront of development, I think we could also work with other G20 members, to kind of address, global economic imbalances. I mean, what's your take on that?
No, absolutely. So as I was saying earlier, there are huge examples. We don't even need to talk to G20. There are huge examples of many countries approaching us for adapting the technology pieces that we have already built. So for example, a lot of South Asia, Africa wants the UPI system, right? The reason is not only is it, I mean, there are many, we have Paytm, US has PayPal, there are many such systems, right? But there is no system in the world which can work with 1.4 billion people at the same time and not break down, right? So that's the key, that we've been able to break all these. So it's even in economics we are taught, right, that if there's a gap in an economy of a particular need, right, you service that need. Why? First, because you're feeling the gap. When you're feeling the gap, you truly want a solution, you make that solution. Once you make that solution, it's easy to then for others to adapt, right? So we made UPI because we needed it as a country. I am sure we must have tried to adapt, asked non-Indian technology companies to help us with that, and realize that it's way too expensive, primarily because of course it's coming from outside. B, catering to such a huge population, they're probably multiplying by number of subscribers and giving you huge development costs, right? And we said, okay, we'll develop it ourselves, right? So we did it for ourselves because it was a huge problem. Once we have solved it, it's working so nicely that we are, and I'm telling you this because I know that if you were to go to the US and you had any bank that you were in the US or you used PayPal, it's not as simple. You can't just, you have to go to your bank, tell them that these are the people I would like to transfer to. It's not as simple as what we do here, right? So I'm just saying that, yes, there are very good examples of how what we are doing here as a country is already in demand from many others who are, they don't have, even some of the more developed economies are saying, okay, I don't need to reinvent the wheel now. You already have done it. I had to do it. I didn't do it. Maybe COVID, maybe Ukraine war. I was saving my money for, oil, etc. I'm now ready. I can just adapt. Right. So we are definitely leading from the front on technology per se, as well as I would say, being more sustainable. As I said, we at my swan song for the last decade has been technology, ESG, put it together as a country. We know how to do this, right? So we know what frugal innovation means. We know what smart innovation means, and we can adapt innovations to the situation that they are. So good examples are, for example, in health tech in our country today, in India, we have the most advanced AI technologies for health-related solutions, be it, trying to discover precision therapies for cancer. We are doing a fab job of it in this country itself, right? And that's like the high end of technology. On the other hand, you have sectors like, let's say, agri-tech, which is more farmer-oriented. You don't need it today, maybe 10 years down the line you need more frugal innovation for him. You don't need to tell him that, with AI, I will convert your farm into selling potatoes to McDonald's. He doesn't want to do that. He just wants better farming, right? And that technology is not as avant-garde. It is just smarter, more frugal technology. We can do both. And that's the amazing part that we have as a, as you said, the available capabilities to do all of these things.
Okay, thank you, Archana. Okay, we have a few questions coming up. It's in the chat, but I'm going to unmute Aditi. Aditi, yeah.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So, ma'am, I have two questions. Ma'am, today in our economy in India, we see that over 60% of our population is still engaged in agriculture, right? So, do you think our country can achieve the developed country badge earlier than what we expect today if we were to reallocate this labor into the tech industry? Or do you think this will negatively affect us as we won't be utilizing our nature-given gift of fertile land?
Okay, so let me answer that. So, there is no, let's do left position or right position as far as this aspect goes. If you were to go to rural India today, especially the agrarian sectors, right? They're not as they're really smart guys. They know what a PNL means. Those farmers have adapted technology like nothing else. They know how to get onto their mobiles and get to the mandis and quote prices basis what they're doing. They know how to access technology which gives them better produce, right? So the key is not to take away. So I'll tell you, how are they transforming themselves? You're right. Maybe if there is more technology coming in, they don't need 20 people from their family working on the farms. So what is the rest of the family doing? They're actually adapting into other models, such as, one family member has become, an insurance seller to the rest of that area, right? Because none of them have insurance. It's so important, right? But they don't have it. So somebody is becoming a insurance broker. Somebody is becoming, saying that I will buy tractors and give it to everybody. The point I'm trying to make is there may be some transfers of technology of people that will happen probably in the next couple of generations when the farming communities, children become more educated and have aspirations beyond farming. Yes, they will transfer to some technology pieces. But do we need to push them towards that? Answer is no. All I'm saying is that just like we in the urban centers are transforming, even the rural centers are seeing so many different opportunities, building on their agrarian base, but having so many other things to do. So that's the point I would make. Therefore, the answer is yes, we can still use our fertile land. We can still keep them adapted. We can still actually have them participate in the technology revolution, right? That was your first question. And I can also see your second question, but please say it so that everybody can hear it.
Go ahead, Aditi.
Yes, ma'am. So my second question is basically that our education system, do you think, is effectively keeping up with the world moving towards a more digitized way of operating in terms of both teaching students in a digitized way and in terms of teaching them how to work with digital aspects as well?
So I can say that, I think the answer lies in the fact that you saw what happened in the pandemic, right? Kashmir was telling me today, we have to use Zoom again, but all of us know how to use Zoom today, right? Many, I can tell you, I didn't go to the US to teach, which I do twice a year in the pandemic. I taught them from here, right? And so we all can teach from any part of the world. In terms of what is digitization at all, what does it mean? It means that do you have the tools and the skill sets that are necessary when you go out? Yes, you're an economic student, but you also know how to use the different pieces of technology. To that, I think the answer is yes. Is the education curriculum completely tuned to this? Probably not. But if you see at least the K to 12, the AR, VR content, the type of different learning techniques that are already being absorbed by many schools, I think, perhaps maybe in the urban centers more than the rural at this point in time, I think that all will proliferate and lead to, a better access to digitization. We all know, I'm sure, Kashmir, as a part of senior management at your school, you all have discussed what do we do with Chat GPT, right? I am on the university's curriculum committee, and they keep saying, how do we stop this? And how do I know that this answer that you wrote is of your own brain, or is it, just come out from, somewhere else, right? I think the answer to what you're saying is yes, curriculums are being slowly changed. They need to adapt very quickly. We need to have a digitized mind. But the good story is that, it's not just about education, right? You didn't learn how to use Insta or Facebook from your school. You learned it on your own in social circles, and now you are able to adapt what you learned there into your own thinking patterns, right? That's what's more critical. How do you become more adaptable to a digitized economy? It's happening from many different areas, but specifically to say, are we as a country and a curriculum education base ready to take on the technology revolution via what we teach? I think some parts are already working. There are other pieces that do need to be changed.
Okay. Thank you, Archana. We have one last question. Nihal, I think I have, yeah.
Yeah. So firstly, Dr. Archana, phenomenal presentation. So thank you for that. I had a couple of questions. One, just if you can talk a little bit about what you think the role of legislation is in this, both where we are ahead and where we are behind, relative to what's happening with GDPR and things like that. And the other is just squarely around China's birth rate slowing, and how does that play into the India growth story?
So I think I want to stop talking about China. We've been talking about it for way too long, right? And I think China is a big country. I think, to my mind, China has reached where it needs to go, right? It has its own path. It is a smart country. It will figure out what is that alternative. I know everybody says aging population, but they're a smart bunch of people, just like we are. So I think I would not even worry about what China is doing. Has the world attitude towards China helped our cause in the last 2 years? Definitely so. People want us to do more manufacturing here. They don't want to be reliant on one country. They know that our systems and processes are more, let's say, more Western world type, both from a legal perspective as well as our ability to talk the language, as well as the fact that we're more of an open society versus China. So of course, clearly that has helped. But whether their aging population, does it matter to us? I think we should not worry about it so much. We should just say that, yes, we have the most, today we are the biggest country with, the right population, right from whatever, 15 years to 40 years, whatever the working age is. We have so many people in that space that we can become a very productive country. In terms of legislation, I would say that slowly, I think there's a lot of legislation that's happening, depending on any sector you go to. You ask me from a financial services angle, because I'm operating in that space. Every day there's new legislation. Where is it coming from? Some of it is not necessarily coming from the right impetus. Some of it comes almost like, I give that analogy all the time. Some of the legislation that you have on the table comes because a bad event happened. It's almost like, how on a road, if an accident happens, they'll put a blocker there, or something that slows you down so that you don't speed, right? So there are some legislation is like that. Is it bad for us? Probably not. It just takes time to get used to it. So that piece is more, let's say, reactive. We have reactive legislation, which is happening a lot. We have benchmark legislation, which is happening a lot. For example, many different legislative bodies of the country keep on figuring out what's happening in the rest of the world. How did they deal with a problem and trying to bring it, even though that problem may or may not exist at this point in time. So we do have that kind of legislation. From a patent perspective, legislation, if you think about it, we have become more friendly to it used to take forever to get patent registration in India, right? So the government has changed all those rules so that, not only are we technology friendly, we have patents that protect what we do. So there are different pieces happening. And did you mention, did you mean GDPR as in the environmental regulations?
Yeah.
Maybe he's speaking and he doesn't know it's on.
One sec, I'll just unmute.
Sorry, no, that was more from the angle around privacy. So data privacy,
okay, yeah. So from a privacy perspective, the way I think, where there are many things that would be questionable from a privacy perspective. For example, we're learning. Okay, so if you go to the US equivalent of Aadhaar, the social security system, right? There is nobody who asks you for your social security number there. They will not. Okay. If they want to verify, they will tell you, please type in your last four digits of your number into this pad, and some system will figure it out, right? We didn't do it in the initial 10 years. Today we have a masked Aadhaar, right? So from today onwards, I know maybe it's like water under the bridge because maybe some systems already know, but there is a way to take it out also. So today you have a masked Aadhaar, right? I hope all of you use masked Aadhaar, which is basically, it only shows the last four digits of your Aadhaar. It doesn't show your full Aadhaar. Okay. But I would tend to say that because we are such a huge population, the same level of privacy rights that people have across the world, probably will be implemented, but I think it'll be implemented like this in steps, first as if it's almost as if everything about you is known, or your, other aspects of your private life are being violated, etc. And then it starts to change. And you're seeing those changes in some of the, broader policies that were made, Aadhaar being the prime example, and many others, which are changing course little by little to make sure that that privacy aspect starts to get recognized.
Thank you. And again, really, really well framed argument. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one last question. We have Dr. Salazar.
Hi.
Mani ma'am, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
So I just wanted to say something about ChatGPT. I experienced that, a lot of assignments going through, a lot of digitized learning. I told the students I'm not afraid of it, but if I can correctly identify that it is not your work, you get no marks. You can go ahead and use it. And the simple thing that I do is language can be identified very easily of the student. And two, you have the simple age-old Viva. And I make a case for going back to offline learning by this, because body language tells you the authenticity of what really has been your passion for that topic. So I'm never afraid. Everything is digitized, digitized, digitized. Go ahead, I say, use it. But when you get to me, I'm going to test you on the reality. And that's why I would stay digitization. I would stay technology. And I would say, come back to class and meet me. That's just what I wanted to say.
No, you're on point, Mrs. Salazar, because I can tell you that the physical meeting of people, be it in this field of education, like you gave an example, or be it in large or small organizations, meeting and understanding body language is the key. So please don't forget, sorry, in all of this, if you felt I was trying to convert all of us into zombies and robots, that's not what I meant. This is what we need to do. But in all of this, culturally, or let's say from a human perspective, what is most critical is to be able to have physical in-person conversations, because there is no substitute for that in understanding humans when you meet them. So
That's
I would
true.
absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're on mute, Cash.
All right. So thank you, Archana. And I think we'll have to bring the keynote session to an end, the question and answers part as well. And I'll ask my co-host to take on their job as photographers. Everybody, could you put on your cameras, please? Switch on your videos so we can have a good click with everyone. Yeah, everybody, please, videos on. I can't see a few people, even my co-host. One is visible, one is not. All right, just go ahead and click, right? Take both the screenshots. Thank you. The host says disabled. Okay.
Kashmira, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, you have disabled everyone. Can you please allow?
Sorry. What do I say? How do I allow?
Ma'am, in the security setting.
Yeah, security, yes. Okay, start video. Is that what I do? Anybody, any ideas? I don't want to hide profile pictures, okay? So I'm not hiding profile pictures. Okay, there has to be something with the participants. 1 second, everyone. Sorry about this. All right, allow participants. It's not giving me an option. What do I do? Anyone, any ideas? We're slightly out of practice with Zoom ever since we've got back online. Offline, sorry. Host has disabled it. So can you tell me how I can enable it? This is embarrassing. Okay, we're just going to have to go with it as it is with the pictures. So, yeah, some people have come on. Yeah, I can see my colleague Pooja. Okay, there are many more coming on. Co-host, did you do some magic? Thank you. Right, the rest are still coming on. Quick, come on. Our next session speaker is already with us. Yes. Anyone else? Okay, Calvin, shall we say cheese? 1, 2, 3, go? Yeah. Okay, everybody, cheese.
Done, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. And once again, Archana, thank you so much for joining us.
My
Wonderful
pleasure.
session. Excellent presentation. Too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Okay, so it's time for our second session. We are going to have Mr. Vikram Sinha with us. I'm going to start sharing my screen so I can introduce Mr. Sinha. Okay. All right. So the speaker for this session is Mr. Vikram Sinha from Artha Global, which is an independent policy, research, consulting, and network facilitation organization based in Mumbai and London. Mr. Vikram Sinha graduated from KC College with a bachelor's degree in journalism, which was followed by a master's in political science from Mumbai University. Vikram then went on to earn a master's degree in international affairs from the George Washington University. He has worked as a journalist with several leading newspapers, including The Mint, DNA, Times of India, The Indian Express, in various editorial capacities. Vikram started his research career at the Henry L. Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Before taking on his current assignment at Artha Global as head, the Center for Technology and Innovation, Vikram worked as the head Data Governance Network at the IDFC Institute. As a researcher at Artha Global, Vikram leads the work on technology and data policy. His research also focuses on data public infrastructure, digital public infrastructure, and digital competition. Thus, he works on policy research and implementation initiatives on digital antitrust, data protection, open data, and digital public infrastructure. Vikram has also led policy submissions to the Government of India and for public consultations on data protection and open data use. He has also collaborated with local government leadership in Maharashtra districts to recommend digital public infrastructure-based models for improved social benefits delivery. We are very privileged to have Vikram share his knowledge and expertise on digital public infrastructure, laying the foundations of inclusive growth in India. Welcome to St. Andrews, Vikram, and over to you. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Calvin and Arshi, have you made Mr. Sinha co-host? Yeah, one sec, Vikram. I'll just unmute you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
All right, great. Thank you for that introduction, Kashmira, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. Wonderful presentation by Dr. Hingorani, and it makes my job easier because she actually talked about quite a few threads that I'd like to pick up on and do a bit of a deep dive on. I don't have a presentation. I'd rather do this as a bit of an informal chat. Do feel free to add questions as I'm speaking to the chat box. So two of the things specifically that that Dr. Hingorani had mentioned was, number one, of course, the success of Aadhaar and UPI. And I absolutely agree that these are initiatives that most developed economies as well have not been able to replicate. And the other thing that she talked about was the importance of inclusive growth. And these two intersect in very, very fundamental ways in the Indian economy and in the Indian state today. So what I'd like to talk about broadly is how that intersection happens and why it's so important. So let's start off with Aadhaar. I mean, most of the people on this call, you're students, you're in college, you've pretty much grown up with Aadhaar, I'm assuming. And you need it for any number of use cases, right? You open a bank account, you need Aadhaar. You're getting a new cell phone account, you need your Aadhaar. You're getting a driving license. I'm assuming some of you would have gotten your driving license already, you would be getting them soon. You're going to need your Aadhaar. UPI is exactly the same. I mean, how many of you even carry cash around anymore? You use Google Pay, you use PhonePe, and it's for any number of use cases, right? You go down to the corner store to buy a loaf of bread, you can pay using UPI. Most of the times when I'm coming to office and if I don't have exact change for the auto guy, I ask him, do you take UPI? And more often than not, he says yes. So you can just pay, you can order on Swiggy with UPI. Now, these sort of, Aadhaar, UPI, a few other sectoral innovations in agriculture, in health, that I'll come to a little later. These are what we call digital public infrastructure. But before I jump into the digital part of it, I want to take a step back and I want to talk about public infrastructure in general. And I'm talking about the analog sort of part of it, the roads, the railways that governments have been building for hundreds of years. Because the principles that animate conventional public infrastructure and digital public infrastructure are exactly the same, and the reasons why they're important. And I'm sure that you guys are economics students. You've probably heard many of the concepts I want to talk about, so just bear with me for a minute. So let's start off with rails. I think I have some statistics here that I just want to quickly So the New York subway is it's a global example of an extremely well-run subway. And in 2017, the New York City government made what was one of the largest expenses in public rail infrastructure for decades in the country. They invested about $4.5 billion in extending that subway system to parts of the city and the outer boroughs that weren't covered yet. Here's what happened because of that investment. There's the people who actually travel by the subway daily to commute, and they saved on an average, and this is fairly easy to measure. We've done the same thing in Mumbai for road traffic, measuring average commute times saved. They saved about 14 minutes every day. So that's the obvious sort of benefit, but it goes levels beyond that, right? Now, people who lived in that area didn't travel by the metro, just lived in that area and drove by car on the roads in that area to get to work. They saved 3 minutes daily, because what happens is that you have more people using the metro. That means less traffic on the road. That means that for the people who are driving, it's a quicker commute. And there's yet another level beyond that, which is that because of these advantages, property prices rose along the tracks. And we see that with all infrastructure even built in India, right? You have a new airport coming up in New Bombay. Property prices are going to go through the roof there. So property prices along the tracks, the estimates are that it rose by about $7 billion. Now you add that to all the economic savings, the fuel savings of the people who either travel by metro or drive along it, drive in those areas, And what you're talking about is, one hell of a return of investment on that initial 4.5 billion. The thing is that the people who actually funded that, the New York City government, they didn't see that money, right? I mean, they don't get that return on investment. It's distributed among the public at large, the people who use the metro, the people who live there. You're going to have exactly the same story when you look at railways everywhere. Look at Delhi. I spent 10 years living in Delhi, which as a Bombay person was an interesting experience. But one thing that they had that we didn't have then, although it is being built now, is the Delhi Metro. Loved traveling by it, incredibly efficient. And again, massive savings because of that. Government initiated the project in 1998. They've spent tens of crores on it. They are not seeing that return on investment. It's the people who are seeing the return on investment. You're going to have exactly the same thing with the Mumbai Metro that's coming up. And you have been seeing it for decades with our local train system. I know it's overburdened, overcrowded, but at the same time, think of the millions of people who use it every day to do jobs that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So these are what we call positive externalities around infrastructure. And this sort of distribution of value, this sort of positive externality, it can actually create a bit of a problem for the builder. Because what happens is that, there's a ticket price if you're traveling by the metro, but that ticket price doesn't exactly recoup the cost of how much it actually costs to build that. Then all the people who get the benefits for free, who live around there or who drive there, they are not being paid for it. And this is called the free rider problem. And because of the free rider problem, you are very rarely going to see private companies interested in building this kind of infrastructure, because private companies very naturally operate on a profit motive, right? And if they're listed companies, they have this fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They can't not operate on a profit motive. Their interest is in the bottom line, the value of the stock. The overriding interest is not really public value. So government has two options here. Number one is you make it worth the private companies' while, which is essentially that you allow them to build monopolies around these things, right? You allow them to build monopolies around railways, perhaps even think of monopolies around roads, and capture that value that is being generated in any way they can. And that's good for companies. It's not so good for everybody else. Because we're not talking about luxuries here. We're talking about the absolute prerequisites of living in a society, of participating in an economy, something as simple as how do you get from point A to point B. The second option is that the government can build that sort of infrastructure itself. Because unlike private companies, a government doesn't have a profit motive. A government's primary responsibility is to create public value, to create public good. And that is what building this sort of infrastructure with government funding, with taxpayer money does. Now, if you take this general logic and apply it to digital public infrastructure, it works exactly the same way. What do I mean by DPI? The sort of semi-technical explanation of that is, these are essentially digital systems, digital tech stacks that allow public and private actors to perform, and this is crucial, to perform population scale service delivery. Dr. Hingrani mentioned this as well in the context of UPI, I think. So under this bracket, you have things like Aadhaar, you have things like digital, you have things like UPI, you have things like data exchanges that sit within government. Now, when the government builds this, we see the value generation that we've seen. Imagine if private actors build these as monopolies, right? It would be absolutely unfeasible. The other important aspect, in fact, crucial aspect of DPI is that these are not single-use infrastructure. These are build once, use many times platforms. And that approach is absolutely crucial to why DPI is such bang for the buck. Once you build these platforms, you're going to have many actors, from governments to civil society organizations like the one I work in, You're going to have private sector companies that can all plug into these platforms, that can build on top of them. So to go back to the rail analogy, think of it as with Aadhaar and with UPI, the government has built the rails on which different sorts of trains can run, which is the sort of services that a company might offer, that the government might offer. So in practical terms, if you go to open an account with a public sector bank like State Bank of India, or with a private sector bank like Kotak, they can both plug into Aadhaar to onboard you. A Jio or an Airtel can both use an Aadhaar to give you a new SIM card. You can use UPI to pay both Jio and Airtel, right? So these are not, you're using the same infrastructure in a huge number of combinations and permutations for different use cases. And this is absolutely crucial in an economy like India's, which, as Dr. Hingorani said, is growing very fast. But if you look at the scale of need and what the government has to do in terms of capital expenditure, there's still fiscal constraints when you're delivering services, when you're enabling others in the economy to deliver services. So you cannot build tech stacks from the ground up for each function, for each use case. That would simply blow the budget out of the water, which is where this reusability, this openness becomes so important. And that openness, that reusability leads to another huge advantage. And I'm again going to trot out that rail analogy. Now, rails are of a specific width, right? So any train that runs on those rails has to have its wheels set at a certain distance apart. Doesn't matter who builds that train. That standard has to be in place. And that's exactly the way that digital public infrastructure works. You want to use Aadhaar, you want to build a service on top of Aadhaar, you want to build a service on top of UPI. You have to use certain common standards and protocols to be able to actually interface with that stack. And what that does is that it allows these systems to exchange data. And that exchange of data is an absolute game changer for the way we think about government services, for the way we think about economic development. And this is where the inclusive growth angle comes in. Now, when COVID-19 happened, all of you must have seen the footage, right? You had millions of workers on the streets. Many died, unfortunately, because there were, lack of exhaustion, lack of food, lack of any other resources. And what you need to do to that, what you need to do to prevent that sort of thing is build a robust social safety net. And just think about the past 15 years. Now, how many economic shocks have we seen, right? There was the 2008 global crisis, which had multiple waves, started in the US, then in 2011, 2012, it spread to Europe. In India, you had when Raghuram Rajan was the governor of RBI, you had the twin balance sheet crisis. You had demonetization, which hit MSMEs extremely hard, to the point that there's still a debate about whether MSMEs have recovered fully or not. And of course, you had the COVID-19 pandemic. And what happens with each of these crises is that large segments of the population that live just above the poverty line, or just a little bit above that poverty line, they lose their jobs, they lose means of livelihood, they face health crises, whatever life savings they've managed to accumulate, they lose all of those in an attempt to deal with those health crises. And then they get pushed below the poverty line, they get pushed into chronic vulnerability. And I don't want to be too pessimistic here, but there are going to be, in the decades to come, a large number of socioeconomic dislocations, right? So because of climate change, you're going to see some industries taper off, in conventional energy industries taper off, perhaps, as Dr. Hingorani was talking about. You're going to see renewable energy sectors grow. You could see, because of coastal areas that are affected by climate change, large inter-country or intra-country, or perhaps even inter-country waves of migration. As the economy digitizes, you're going to see some analog jobs fade out. You're going to see new sorts of digital jobs grow. And what all of this does is that it creates economic shocks, economic dislocations, and to actually buffer people against that, to enable inclusive growth. You need a social protection system, a social welfare system that's not just robust, but incredibly flexible and agile and able to actually pivot very, very quickly to address these new challenges, as you know, it tried to do during COVID-19, when new schemes were initiated very quickly, direct benefit transfers, PDS increases, etc. Dealing with this, building a robust social safety net is not easy at all, because it's in economics and public policy. Again, this is something that you guys have probably studied. It's what is called a wicked problem, which means that it's multi-causal, and there's no single solution. There's no clean and easy solution. You pull at one string of this issue, and that knot tightens somewhere else. So to think of an example, imagine you have two social protection schemes. Both of them, the conditionality to qualify for that scheme is that you have to be earning below a certain amount of money. Your income needs to be below a certain threshold. Now, suppose a person qualifies for scheme A, which is income support, which means they get a little bit of direct income support from the government. And what that does is it pushes them just a little bit above that qualifying line for scheme B. Now that transfer is not enough to really make them not need scheme B, but at the same time, they can no longer access scheme B. And this is what happens when, when you have a lot of economic, a lot of social protection elements interacting, sometimes in synergy, but very often in oppositional ways. And one of the most vulnerable populations that is, to take an example, is migrants within India, right? Now, this is a huge population. Again, let me just look up some data. As per the 2011 census, and this is, remember, this is well over a decade ago now. So the numbers likely to have grown very, very quickly since then. We had 456 million intrastate and interstate migrants in that year. And that accounts for 38% of the population. It's likely to have grown a great deal since then. And I recall there was somebody, a student called Aditi perhaps, who had asked a question about, what was it? I've made a quick note here, 60% of the population being involved in agriculture. That's a slightly misleading figure, because a large percentage of that population is actually a migrant population. They're seasonal workers in agriculture. In planting season and harvesting season, they'll be working in agriculture. In off-season, they'll be migrating to nearby urban centers to work, most often in the construction sector, perhaps in some other jobs. So as you can see, with a labor force that is so dynamic, that is so fluid, how do you cater to them? How do you even get a sense of what the scale of the problem is, what the needs are? And because of how fragmented that is, the entire social sector, social protection architecture is completely fragmented as well. So you have, and we're talking just about central level here. At state level, there are far more. So in the, not in the 23 budget, but in the 22 budget, you had about 815 different social protection schemes being run by the center. And each state will have a large number more of state-specific schemes. So now imagine how much data is fragmented among all these schemes. Imagine how many databases are not working together. And because of that, imagine how many of these situations, like the example I mentioned, where you qualify for scheme A and it makes you ineligible for scheme B. how many of those situations are taking place. Now, when we talk about digital public infrastructure, right now, because of this fragmentation, less than 24% or just about 24% of Indians are covered by social protection schemes. The actual need is far higher. And what happens is that for each scheme, you have different targeting methods, you have different databases. Each database uses different data standards. So databases, so for example, when you say address, an individual's address in one database, it could mean just your district. Your address in another database could mean your street. And so these databases can't really talk together. So we actually did a study in, my team did a study in Chandrapur and Nagpur late last year and this year, to figure out how all of this fragmentation actually affects, the end users, the workers. And the scheme we targeted is called BOCW. It's the Building and Other Construction Workers scheme. And this is massively, massively important to the economy, right? We're talking about close to 60 million people, which is about 7%, 60% of the people employed in this sector, 60 million people employed in this sector, accounts for about 7% of GDP. It's nearly 50% of industrial employment in the country. And again, these are very vulnerable populations, many of them seasonal migrants. Now, what BOCW does is it's essentially a card. Think of BOCW as an entry point. Once you qualify for the Building and Other Construction Workers scheme, and once you get that card, that then makes you eligible for a range of other benefits, right? From health to education of your children, to childcare, to health insurance, the huge scheme, the huge range of benefits. And what we found when we did this survey was that uptake among workers is actually extremely poor. Most of them didn't even bother getting the card because of what they had heard about how ineffective it is. Most of those who did get the card were unable to actually use it to get benefits. Right? So 74.3% of our respondents said that they found the process far too complicated. So what the issue here with this fragmentation of data within government and social protection is, now to qualify for BOCW, you give your Aadhaar card number, you give your proof of address, which sometimes can be in Aadhaar, you give your proof of employment from whichever contractor has employed you on that site. You give whatever other documentation is needed, right? So that's step one. Once you do this, suppose you want health benefits that BOCW qualifies you for. You have to submit all of those documents plus extra documents all over again. Suppose you want to qualify for education benefits for your children as a construction worker. Again, submit all of those documents from scratch. Because even though these are part of the same scheme, each of these benefits sit within their own completely firewall silos. They don't talk to each other. And that is the fundamental problem of the social protection system in India today. And that is where, when we say that DPI is a platform with standards that can bring about commonness, that can bring about interoperability between different systems, between different databases, that is the vital role that DPI can play. So imagine, for example, that every scheme that operated within BOCW had to use exactly the same data standards. And what does that mean? That means that each of these scheme databases can talk to each other. So a construction worker gives all the documentation, qualifies for BOCW. Now he applies for, again, health insurance, right? The health insurance administrators look at the main BOCW database and they say, look, we already have all these documents in that database. And they simply pull it from that database. And then they just ask that worker for those 1 or 2 other documents that might be missing in the main database. School education for the children don't need to submit anything. In fact, the worker doesn't even need to apply proactively because the school, the school benefits, the administrators take a look at the other databases, get a sense of the economic profile of the earnings, and say, you know what, you qualify for this. They push a SMS out, say, we've already pulled your documents from the other databases. You're going to start seeing that money land up in your bank account. That sort of proactivity, that sort of agility for government to actually talk to each other instead of just sitting within silos is what digital public infrastructure can enable. And it's already started happening at a pretty large scale. So Karnataka has something called Kutumb that I would strongly advise all of you to just, there are lots of videos, there are lots of documents about Kutumb. It's a fantastic scheme for how you can, it's the single entry point for social protection. And after that, it's seeded across the entire social protection system. Right? Maharashtra is in very much the initial stages, but it's trying to build out something called Maha ID. And what Maha ID will do is, right now, there are 52 to 56 administrative data sets within the Maharashtra government, which have, different sorts of data about pretty much all of us, even those of us who don't necessarily apply for social protection. But we deal with the government for other things, right? We register our rent leases, or we have property documents, or we have driver's licenses. And what Maha ID wants to do is it wants all of these administrative data sets to be able to talk to each other using common standards, using Aadhaar as the common link identity of recipients across all of these data sets. And that as a force multiplier for delivering services is, the potential effects from the perspective of savings from the government, from the perspective of the quality of service delivery, from the perspective of what the timelines are for service delivery. It is just an absolute game changer. I do want to just raise one point here that Nihal raised when he talked about data privacy. Now that is an extremely important aspect of it, right? Because the line they use about, say, Stalin is that Stalin made the trains run on time, but the trains were running to take prisoners to the Gulag. So making a system work well without adequate safeguards can be very, very dangerous. Privacy risks can lead to the sort of state surveillance that none of us want. As Dr. Hingorani said, these are safeguards that the government is starting to put in place. Of course, other countries, like other groupings of nations like the EU have already had the GDPR in place. Japan, Brazil, all of them are thinking through these issues. We are not quite where we should be. We are working towards it. It's going to take, I would say, another 5 to 7 years to have a robust regulatory architecture in place. But with that architecture in place, unlocking the full potential of digital public infrastructure that can enable not each department or each ministry within the government to work in this closed off silo, but for a whole of government approach to governance, to social protection. That is the sort of flexibility, that is the sort of approach to governance that we're going to need to deal with all the dislocations, all the economic shocks, and the positive economic shocks as well of changing labor profiles. So that's a very quick high level overview. Kashmir, happy to take questions now.
Right. Thank you, Vikram. We already have one in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it out because Netra's mic is not working. She says, DPI requires huge investment in general, which it has shown a good return on. But what about the problem of quick, I think she means getting quickly outdated, quick outdatation of tech. Reusability is a very important benefit, and stacking has worked so far. But how would you advise the planning of even larger projects? How to test what will allow itself to become a good foundation for another sheet, into quotes, on the stack, and what would become a problem in the long term? Yeah, I know it's a little long-winded, but
No, but that's, I mean, that's an important question. And that goes back to the sort of fundamental principles of DPI. That is why, you know, what DPI is really meant to do is not build solutions, but to provide these sort of modular tools, or to provide, this platform that other people can then use to build the solutions, right? So when I say standards and protocols, if you talk about here is a standard by which all government databases must organize themselves by this standard for certain types of data. And that is not a piece of technology, it's simply a protocol. And what that does is that protocol can then be plugged into all sorts of new forms of technology, right? I mean, you're not building a piece of technology that will be outdated. You're laying you're putting in place the guardrails within which new technology can be built, and using which new forms of technology can continue to interface and interact with older technology. And the other important aspect of this is that putting these guardrails in place, putting these standards in place, then means that government isn't using taxpayer money to do all the heavy lifting. There's that initial capital expenditure, but what it then does is that it allows private sectors to sort of make their investments and to build solutions on top of it. And if a private sector solution, the technology gets sold, that's fine. Companies rise, companies fall. Another company is going to come along and use those standards to build a new tech solution on top of it. So think of UPI. Now, UPI, the protocol for peer-to-peer cash transfers, is the platform. Now, that has been built by a consortium of banks that has been backed by the central government, by the RBI. But what you actually use to use UPI, PhonePe or Google Pay, these are private sector solutions. These are not, and if a Google Pay gets outdated tomorrow, somebody else makes a new app that gives you better functionality, that gives you, a cleaner UI, a better UI. You're going to switch to that app. Google loses out on market share, stock price goes down. That's fine. The other company's stock price goes up. That's perfectly okay.
yeah. Okay. So the girl who asked questions says, thank you very much. You cleared her doubts. Thanks a lot. Okay, there's one more thing which has come to me privately, and I think it's more of a comment and a clarification. So we are talking about digital infrastructure. So wouldn't that require a certain amount of literacy for the beneficiaries to actually access, for instance, government benefits or whatever, and that such benefits, of course, it takes care of the issue of corruption because you have this kind of technology, but does it also require India to speed up literacy a little bit? And the second part of that question was in terms of, everybody says that the government should move out of the economy. But when it comes to taking care of the underprivileged, that's where we do need them. And that's where this digital infrastructure becomes so very important. And so the government does need to play a role. And as you just said, then the private sector can build on that. And okay, so your take on it.
So to answer the first question, absolutely agree. And look, so what I talked about today was digital public infrastructure. So I focus on the digital aspect of it. That's the work I do. But one thing that we are very clear about when we are working with government, when we are helping them think through digital solutions, is that for any policy problem, the digital part of it is one part of the solution. No digital tool, no platform, no DPI is going to solve your problem end to end, every aspect of it. It is simply not going to happen. You need very robust analog, conventional systems and components around that to actually make that system work. Literacy is a big problem. Now, there's some technical ways to kind of attack that problem to some extent. So for example, as I was saying, that suppose a person qualifies for one scheme and they submit the documentation, and if databases can talk to each other, then they don't even need to apply for the other scheme. They don't even need to be aware of it. The other government department can pick up this data, run the algorithm, say this person qualifies for our scheme, push an SMS out to them or send them a call, and that person starts getting the benefits. But again, I just want to repeat that this is not a foolproof solution. This doesn't remove the need for literacy. So when we're talking about UPI and financial inclusion, has UPI helped financial inclusion? Absolutely, to a great deal. But I would say that it was actually something else back in 2005 that the RBI did that had nothing to do with digital, that has done far more for financial inclusion. And that was that they put in place and operationalized the idea of banking correspondents. Now, what are banking correspondents? They are simply agents employed by banks who go to rural areas where it's not financially viable for a bank to set up a bank branch, and where you have, people, rural workers, agricultural workers with poor financial literacy who might not even know how to operate a bank account, where you have this untapped customer base. And the banking correspondent goes to these people, explains the process to them, walks them through what having a bank account means, how to operate a bank account, and then helps them through the whole process, and then continues to help them access that bank account. So, that sort of literacy measure in improving the level of information, I think has done even more than UPI. And you need those two to work together. Neither one by itself is going to be enough. I can't hear you, Kashmir. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, so many years after the pandemic, we still forget sometimes.
Yeah. So the other question is about the Maha ID and other upcoming DPI initiatives. Where can students like me, she says, go to hear or learn about them as they are in the process or in the testing stages?
So the problem is that, unfortunately, whether the central government or the state governments, they don't always put out information in public as they should, not for any nefarious purposes. It's just, it's not, that sort of transparency is not a high priority always. That said, there are two things. Number one is, Kashmira, later I'm happy to on email sort of drop you a few resources that students can keep an eye on. And the other very, very simple thing that we learned as journalists was, if you're on Twitter, follow the Press Information Bureau of India and follow the Ministry of Information Technology, follow your state governments, and because very often they don't appear, this information won't come on any website, but these Twitter accounts will kind of, because it makes the government look good. So they'll post a few tweets about it. They'll talk about it. And that's how you get a lead that, okay, this is a new initiative that's coming up. Now let me look elsewhere and see what I can find on it.
Yeah, I was muted again. Yeah, so that's a great idea. And I'm sure most of our students do follow Twitter, and of course for other reasons, but I'm sure they could do this as well. Instagram, I guess, also. And most of the, I think, government's offices, and whether they're Indian or international institutions, these days do have a social presence. So if you want to, I mean, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's Twitter. There are places where you can get a lot of information.
Yeah, and these are places, as I said, where they put information that very often you won't find anywhere else.
Right.
So, yeah.
Even Niti Aayog has its handle that, continuously pumps out information to the point where I almost thought of stopping, because so much comes out.
It's a lot of it. Sometimes it's just spam.
Overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions, or it's time for a photograph? Okay, my co-hosts and everybody, please switch on your cameras. Okay. I see a lot of names, and I think part of the reason could be, when I sent out the logins, I gave them very strict instructions. Don't do this, don't do that. So poor people, most of them have, I think, followed my instructions very well. Thank you. And okay, I think, Calvin, you can go ahead. Everybody cheese, 1, 2, 3. Here goes, smile. Right, done?
Done.
Yeah, great. So Vikram, thank you so much. It was great to get an idea about digital infrastructure, to clarify some of our doubts about, things like, and questions about literacy and the government involvement, etc. So I think all in all, we can expect, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years, a fantastic transformation of the scene for most of the normal, people, whether they're agriculturists, all right, or they're migrant laborers or anybody. I think we are, we are in for a good
No.
right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's just one last quick comment that the World Bank has put out this stat that using UPI, India has done in about 8 years the level of financial inclusion that in other countries has taken about 7 decades. So, I mean, the potential for this quantum leap is absolutely huge.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you once again, Vikram. Thank you for taking time out from the schedule and being with us. I'm not asking you to leave. I'm just saying thank you for this.
Sure.
Thanks so much.